The call came on a Tuesday. I was folding my only sweater when Patricia Monroe knocked on the doorframe. She had that look on her face, the one social workers get when they're about to change your life and pretend it's routine. After 13 years in the system, I knew that look better than I knew my own reflection. "Carolina," she said, using my full name. Never a good sign. "There's a lawyer on the phone for you." I was 18 years and 23 days old. In exactly 7 days, I would age out of St. Anne's Children's Home. The studio apartment Patricia had found me was 12 miles away in a neighborhood where sirens sang lullabies every night. My entire future fit into a duffel bag and a trash bag with $200 in cash that was supposed to last until I found work. Lawyers didn't call girls like me. I followed Patricia down the hallway where I'd walked 1,000 times, past the bulletin board still decorated with construction paper hearts from Valentine's Day 3 months ago. The phone in her office was old, the kind with a curly cord that never quite untangled. She handed it to me and stepped out, closing the door with a soft click that somehow felt louder than a slam. "Miss Brennan?" The voice was male, older, with an accent that softened the edges of my last name. "This is Howard Mitchell. I'm an attorney in Cedar Falls, Nebraska." Nebraska. I'd never been west of the Mississippi River. "I'm calling about the estate of Thomas Hart. He passed away 2 months ago, and you are named as the sole beneficiary of his will." The words felt like they were coming through water. Estate, beneficiary, will. These were things that happened to other people, people who had families and histories and middle names that meant something. "I think you have the wrong person," I said. "I don't know anyone named Thomas Hart." "He was your grandfather, Miss Brennan. Your mother's father." "My mother, Rose Brennan." I had exactly one photograph of her, creased and faded, kept in the zippered pocket of my duffel bag. A woman with red hair like mine, holding a baby with eyes squeezed shut against the sun. On the back, someone had written, "Rose and Carolina, 3 months," in handwriting I'd never seen before. She died when I was 1. That was all I knew. That was all anyone had ever told me. "Mr. Hart left you 80 acres and a farmhouse in Cedar Falls," the lawyer continued, "as well as some additional provisions I'd prefer to discuss in person. I can wire you funds for a bus ticket if—" "Why?" The question came out sharper than I intended, but I needed to know. People didn't leave things to strangers. And I was a stranger. I'd never heard Thomas Hart's name before this moment. Howard Mitchell was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was gentler. "I think he wanted to explain that himself, Miss Brennan. There are letters, a video, things he wanted you to have." Another pause. "Things he wanted you to understand." I took the bus ticket information, wrote it down on the back of a permission slip that would never be turned in. After I hung up, I sat in Patricia's chair and stared at my handwriting, trying to make sense of letters that spelled out a place I'd never been, and a man I'd never met. That night, I couldn't sleep. I pulled out the photograph of my mother and studied it under the flashlight I kept under my pillow. Rose Brennan had been 19 when she died, younger than I was now. The baby in her arms, me, looked impossibly small, impossibly fragile. Had she talked about her father? Had she wanted to go home? The questions felt like birds trapped in my chest, beating wings against my ribs. The envelope arrived 3 days later, Forwarded from Howard Mitchell's office. Inside was a bus ticket, $300 in 20s, and a photograph that made my hands shake. It was old, the colors slightly faded, the edges soft with age. Two people stood in front of a white farmhouse with a porch that wrapped around the front. A man, maybe in his 60s, tall and lean with silver hair. And a girl, 17 or 18, with red hair pulled back in a ponytail and a shy smile. She was pregnant, very pregnant, her hands resting on her belly in that universal gesture of protection. The man wasn't smiling. His face was stone, his arms crossed over his chest. And someone, I don't know who, had drawn a red X across the girl's face, not scratched, drawn carefully, deliberately, with what looked like marker. My mother, and her father, who wouldn't smile for her. On the back, in the same handwriting from my baby photograph, Thomas and Rose, July 2005. I left St. Anne's on a Saturday morning. Patricia hugged me, which she'd never done before, and pressed a $20 bill into my hand, even though she wasn't supposed to. The other girls, the ones who still had time left before aging out, watched from the windows. I didn't wave. I'd learned a long time ago that goodbyes were easier when you didn't look back. The bus ride took 14 hours. I watched California turn into Nevada, Nevada dissolve into Utah, Utah give way to the endless rolling plains of Nebraska. The land got flatter, wider, emptier. The sky got bigger. By the time we crossed into Nebraska, the horizon seemed to stretch on forever in every direction, unbroken except for an occasional farmhouse or grain silo rising like a lighthouse from an ocean of grass. Cedar Falls wasn't really a town. It was a main street 4 blocks long, a scattering of houses and fields that ran to the edge of the world. The bus depot was just a bench under an awning attached to a gas station. One other person got off with me, an older man who was immediately collected by a woman in a pickup truck. They drove away, and I stood alone with my duffel bag and trash bag, breathing air that smelled like dirt and something green I couldn't name. Howard Mitchell picked me up in a sedan that had seen better decades. He was exactly what he'd sounded like on the phone, mid-60s, kind eyes, careful words. He didn't ask questions during the 15-minute drive, and I was grateful. I pressed my forehead against the window and watched farmland scroll past like a film I was supposed to recognize, but didn't. Then he turned onto a gravel driveway, and I saw it. The house from the photograph. White paint peeling in long strips. A porch that sagged slightly in the middle, like a smile that had forgotten how. 2 stories, windows dark, a red barn behind it that leaned just enough to look tired but not defeated. And beyond that, fields. 80 acres, Howard had said. It looked like the entire world. The car stopped, and I didn't move. The deed is already transferred to your name, Howard said quietly. It's yours, Miss Brennan. Free and clear. Why? The same question I'd asked on the phone, but this time it came out as a whisper. I think you'll find answers inside. He reached into the back seat and pulled out a manila envelope. These are the keys. The utilities are on. I've stocked the refrigerator with basics. There's a video. Thomas recorded it in January, about a month before he passed. I think you should watch it before we talk more. He handed me the envelope and the keys. His hand was warm, steady. Mine was shaking. I'll check on you tomorrow, he said. If you need anything before then, my number's in the envelope. Then he was gone, and I was alone. I stood in the driveway for a long time. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in colors I'd only seen in paintings, orange and pink and purple, layered like watercolors bleeding together. The air smelled different here, cleaner, emptier, like it had room to breathe. The grass around the house had been mowed recently. I could see the lines, still green and crisp. The porch had been swept, and on the steps, in a ceramic pot, fresh flowers bloomed, petunias, purple and white, their faces turned toward the last of the sun. Someone had been taking care of this place. My hands fumbled with the keys, 3 of them on a simple ring. The front door lock was old, stubborn, but it turned. The door opened with a creak that sounded like it was asking a question. Inside, the house was dim and cool. I found a light switch. Yellow light filled a living room that looked frozen in time. Furniture covered with white sheets, hardwood floors that creaked under my feet, a stone fireplace, built-in bookshelves filled with books I couldn't read the titles of in the fading light. But no dust. The floors were clean. The air didn't smell stale. Someone had been here, recently. I walked through the first floor like I was in a museum. Kitchen with white cabinets and a window over the sink that looked out on the barn. Dining room with a table big enough for 8. Bathroom with black and white tile. Everything old but cared for. Everything waiting. Upstairs there were 4 doors. 3 were closed. 1 was open. I walked toward it the way you walk toward a cliff edge, knowing you shouldn't look down but unable to stop yourself. The room had been prepared for me. A bed with a quilt in shades of blue and cream, the pattern so intricate it must have taken months to make. A dresser with drawer pulls shaped like flowers. A nightstand with a lamp and a photograph in a simple wooden frame. Rose, younger than in the photo from the envelope, maybe 15 or 16, sitting on the porch steps with a book in her lap and a smile like sunlight. And on the bed, a teddy bear. Old, well-loved, one eye hanging by a thread. Above the headboard, a piece of wood with words burned into it in careful letters. For Cara. No one had ever called me Cara, but somehow, seeing it there, it felt like my real name, like the name I was supposed to have if things had been different. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled the teddy bear into my lap. Its fur was soft, worn thin in places from being held. It smelled faintly of cedar and something else. Something I wanted to call home, even though I didn't know what home was supposed to smell like. That's when I cried. Not the quiet tears I'd learned to cry in group homes, where showing too much emotion made you a target. Not the angry tears I'd cried into pillows when I was young enough to still believe someone might come save me. These were different. They felt like they came from somewhere deeper. Somewhere I'd kept locked for so long I'd forgotten it existed. They felt like grief for something I'd never had, relief for something I'd found, fear that it would disappear if I let myself believe it was real. I cried until I couldn't anymore, until my throat was raw and my eyes burned. Then I lay down on the bed that had been made for me, holding the teddy bear, and fell asleep in my clothes as the sun finished setting outside the window. When I woke, it was dark, fully dark in a way I'd never experienced. No streetlights, no headlights, no glow from neighboring buildings, just darkness so complete it felt solid. And in that darkness, I heard something. Footsteps on the stairs. My whole body went rigid. I'd been attacked before, twice, in different group homes. I'd learned to sleep light and wake fast. My hand reached for the lamp, found the switch, flooded the room with light. In the doorway sat a dog, golden fur gone gray around the muzzle, brown eyes watching me with what looked like patience. Old, maybe 12 or 13, with a face that somehow looked gentle and sad at the same time. He didn't move, just sat there, tail making a slow sweep across the floor. "Hey," I whispered. His tail moved faster. I slid off the bed slowly, carefully, held out my hand. He sniffed it, then pushed his head under my palm. His fur was soft, warm, real. "Who are you?" I asked. He looked toward the stairs like he was waiting for me to follow. I did. He led me down the stairs, his nails clicking on the hardwood, and straight to the kitchen. There, magnetized to the refrigerator, was a note on lined paper. The handwriting was shaky but readable. "Dear Cara, this is Rufus. He was your grandfather's dog. He's been waiting for you. There's food for him under the sink. There's food for you in the fridge. I've been keeping the house ready. I hoped you'd come. Welcome home. Call me when you're ready. Dorothy Whitmore, 402-555-0847. I read it 3 times. Opened the refrigerator and found it stocked. Milk, eggs, bread, cheese, fresh vegetables, a casserole covered in foil. Opened the cabinet under the sink and found a bag of dog food, bowl, treats. This woman, Dorothy Whitmore, had been taking care of this place, taking care of Rufus, waiting for me. Why? Rufus nudged my hand again, and I realized I'd been standing frozen, holding the note. I found his bowl, filled it with food and water. He ate slowly, like he had all the time in the world, like he knew I wasn't going anywhere. After he finished, he led me back upstairs to the room that had been prepared for me, curled up on a rug beside the bed, and went to sleep. I sat on the bed and looked around the room. Really looked this time. The dresser had something on top of it I hadn't noticed before. A small wooden box, simple and unvarnished. My hands were shaking again as I opened it. Inside was a USB drive with a label in the same shaky handwriting. "Watch this first, Thomas." My laptop was ancient, a donated machine from St. Anne's that took 5 minutes to boot up. I sat on the bed with it balanced on my knees, Rufus breathing steady and slow on the floor beside me, and plugged in the drive. One file. Video. Dated January 2024. I clicked play. The screen showed the kitchen downstairs. Same white cabinets, same window. And sitting at the table was a man I recognized from the photograph. Older now, much older. 80-something, thin in the way that comes with age, silver hair combed back. But the same face. The same man who'd stood stone-faced beside my pregnant mother. He looked directly at the camera, directly at me, and when he spoke, his voice cracked on the first word. "Cara." He stopped, cleared his throat, tried again. "I'm Thomas Hart. I'm your grandfather. And I'm..." He closed his eyes, opened them. "I'm a coward." I couldn't breathe. "I found you 9 years ago. You were 10 years old. I hired a private investigator after your mother died, and it took him 9 years to find you. St. Anne's Children's Home in California. I drove there. I parked across the street. I sat in my truck for 3 hours, and I saw you. You were in the yard with other kids. You had your mother's hair. Her eyes. The way you stood with your arms crossed. That was her too when she was angry or scared." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I wanted to walk across that street and bring you home. I wanted to tell you that you had family, that you had a place, that you belonged somewhere. But I couldn't, because I'm the reason your mother left. I'm the reason she died alone. I'm the reason you grew up without her." The camera stayed steady, but I could see his hands shaking on the table. Rose came home pregnant when she was 17, came to me and told me she was going to keep you, that she was going to be a mother. And his voice broke. I said terrible things. I told her she was throwing her life away. I told her she was being irresponsible and selfish. I told her she couldn't raise a child. I didn't ask who the father was. I didn't ask if she needed help. I was so angry, so disappointed, so afraid. He looked down at his hands. She left that night, took what she could carry, and walked out. I thought she'd come back in a few days, when she was ready to be reasonable, when she was ready to listen. She never came back. The silence on the video lasted so long, I thought it had frozen. Then he looked up again. I searched for her for years, hired investigators, put ads in papers, called every hospital and shelter between here and the coast. Nothing. It wasn't until 2015 that I found out she died. You were in the system by then, 10 years old. And I couldn't. He stopped. I couldn't face you. Not after what I'd done. I didn't deserve to be your grandfather. So I watched from a distance. I made anonymous donations to St. Anne's every year. I planned for this. He gestured to the space around him. This farm is yours, free and clear. There's money in a trust for you. Enough to fix what needs fixing. Enough to live on while you figure out what you want to do. There are letters from your mother. Things I saved. Things I should have told you years ago. He paused. I'm recording this in January. The doctor says I have maybe 3 months. Heart. It's fitting, I suppose. I broke your mother's heart, and now mine is breaking. His eyes were wet now, tears tracking down his weathered face. I can't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I can give you this. A home. A place. A choice your mother never had. Stay or sell it. It's yours. Everything is yours. I wanted you to know that you were loved. That your mother loved you. That I love you. Even though I never had the courage to tell you to your face. He reached toward the camera, and the screen went black. I sat in the darkness of the room, the laptop screen the only light, and felt something inside me crack open, not break, open. Like a door I'd been pushing against my whole life had finally given way. This man, this stranger who was my grandfather, had found me, had watched me, had waited until I was old enough to choose. And then he'd left me everything. Not because he thought he deserved my forgiveness, but because he thought I deserved a home. Rufus shifted on the floor, his tail thumping twice against the rug. Tomorrow I'd explore the barn he seemed so interested in earlier. Tomorrow I'd see what else Thomas had left for me, but tonight I just needed to breathe. I closed the laptop, set it aside, and slid down onto the floor beside him. He rolled closer, pressed his warm weight against my side. In the darkness, in this house that had been waiting for me, with this dog who'd been waiting for me, I finally let myself ask the question I'd been too afraid to ask since the phone call. What if this was real? What if I could stay? I fell asleep there on the floor, my hand buried in Rufus's fur, and for the first time in 13 years, I dreamed of something other than leaving. When I woke to sunlight streaming through the window, Rufus was staring at me with those patient brown eyes. I followed him downstairs, fed him breakfast, and stood at the kitchen window looking out at 80 acres that belonged to me. The fields, the barn, the sky so wide it made my chest hurt. And somewhere in this house, there were letters from my mother. Answers to questions I didn't even know how to ask yet. But first, I had a phone call to make. I picked up the note from the refrigerator and dialed the number written in shaky handwriting. It rang twice before a woman's voice answered, older, warm, with an accent that softened the vowels. "This is Dorothy." "Hi," I said, my voice rough from sleep and crying. "This is Cara Brennan. You left a note on my refrigerator." There was a sharp intake of breath. Then, softly, "Oh dear, you're here. You came." "I'm here," I said, looking out at the morning light on the fields. Can you tell me what's going on?" A pause. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion I didn't understand yet. "I can. I will. But not over the phone, dear. Let me bring you some breakfast, and we can talk. Would that be all right?" I should have said no. 13 years in the system teaches you not to trust kindness from strangers. But something in her voice, something that sounded like grief and hope mixed together, made me say yes. "Okay. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She hung up, and I stood in the kitchen of a house I'd inherited from a man I'd never met, in a town I'd never heard of, waiting for a woman I didn't know to explain why my whole life had just changed. Rufus sat beside me, his tail wagging slowly. Outside, the Nebraska sky stretched on forever, and somewhere in that endless blue, I thought I could feel my mother watching, waiting to see what I would do next. Dorothy Whitmore arrived in a pickup truck the color of faded denim, dust trailing behind her like a veil. I watched from the kitchen window as she parked beside Howard Mitchell's tire tracks, taking her time gathering things from the passenger seat. She was smaller than I'd imagined from her voice, maybe 5'3", thin in that wiry way that comes from a lifetime of physical work. White hair pulled back in a bun, hands that moved with purpose. She carried a wicker basket covered with a checkered cloth. When she reached the porch steps, she paused, looking up at the house the way you look at something precious that might break. Then she saw me through the screen door, and her whole face changed. Her hand went to her mouth. The basket nearly slipped from her grip. I opened the door slowly. We stood there, separated by the threshold, studying each other. Her eyes were blue, faded like old denim, and they were wet. "You have Rose's eyes," she whispered. "Exactly." The way she said my mother's name, like it hurt and healed at the same time, made something in my chest constrict. "I'm Dorothy," she said, steadying herself. "I lived 3 miles down the road from your grandfather for 40 years. I was a friend of your mother's." Past tense. Was. She lifted the basket slightly. "May I come in? I brought cinnamon rolls. Made them this morning." I stepped back, and she entered the house like she'd been here 1,000 times, which I realized she probably had. She'd been keeping it ready, keeping it alive. In the kitchen, she unpacked the basket with practiced efficiency. Fresh cinnamon rolls still warm, butter, homemade jam, a thermos of coffee. She worked around me, pulling plates from cabinets she knew by heart, forks from drawers she didn't have to search for. Rufus sat beside her, tail wagging, receiving absent scratches behind his ears. "Sit," she said gently. You must be exhausted. I sat. She poured coffee into mugs that had small chips on the rims. Old mugs, kept because they worked, not because they were pretty. She set a cinnamon roll on my plate, pushed the butter toward me, then sat down across from me with her own coffee, but no food. I don't know where to start, she said. The beginning, I suggested. My voice came out harder than I intended. 13 years of protecting yourself doesn't disappear overnight. She nodded, wrapping her hands around her mug like she needed the warmth despite the June morning. I met Rose when she was 12, Dorothy began. Just moved here with her father after her mother died. Thomas bought this farm, and Rose was like sunlight. Even sad, even grieving, she had this way of making you feel like the world was better than it was. Her eyes went distant, seeing something I couldn't. I had a daughter, Evelyn. She would have been your mother's age. Would have been. She said it matter-of-factly, but I heard the weight underneath. Evelyn died when she was 15. Car accident. After that, I wasn't good for much. But Rose, she'd come over. She'd sit with me. She'd tell me about her day, about the books she was reading, about the garden she was trying to grow. She saved me, I think, in the ways you can save someone just by showing up. She took a sip of coffee. When Rose got pregnant, Thomas didn't handle it well. He loved her, don't doubt that, but he was scared. He'd already lost his wife. He couldn't lose his daughter too. So he tried to control what he couldn't control, and he said things he couldn't take back. She left, I said. She left, Dorothy confirmed. July of 2005, 17 years old and 7 months pregnant. I saw her the night she went. She came to my house around midnight, carrying a backpack and crying so hard she could barely breathe. I begged her to stay. I told her I'd talk to Thomas, that we'd figure it out together, but she was so hurt, so angry. She said she'd rather raise you alone than raise you where she wasn't wanted. The cinnamon roll sat untouched on my plate. I should have stopped her, Dorothy said, her voice breaking. I should have called Thomas. I should have driven her somewhere safe, but I let her walk away into the dark, and I never saw her again. The guilt in her voice was so thick I could almost touch it, and suddenly I understood why she'd been keeping this house, why she'd been waiting for me. She was trying to make up for the night she let my mother disappear. It's not your fault, I heard myself say. Her eyes snapped to mine, surprised, then filled with tears that spilled over before she could stop them. Maybe not, she whispered. But it feels like it was. It's felt like it was for 19 years. We sat in silence for a while. I picked at the cinnamon roll, which was perfect. Sweet and soft and still warm. Dorothy composed herself, wiping her eyes with a napkin embroidered with small flowers in the corner. Thomas looked for her, she continued, for years, hired investigators, put advertisements in newspapers across 3 states. He found out she died in 2006, but it took him until 2015 to find you. He came to me after that first trip to California, sat at this table and cried, said he'd seen you but couldn't bring himself to approach, said he didn't deserve to be your grandfather after what he'd done. She looked around the kitchen like she was seeing ghosts. He spent the next 9 years preparing this place for you, fixed everything, updated the wiring, the plumbing. He planted that oak tree out front because Rose always wanted one. He made that quilt in your room. Learned how from YouTube videos, if you can believe it. Took him 2 years. He wanted everything to be ready. He wanted you to have a home, even if he couldn't be here to give it to you himself. My throat was too tight to speak. He asked me to watch over it after he died, Dorothy said, to keep it ready, to make sure that when you came, if you came, you'd find it waiting. So I mowed the grass and watered the flowers and kept Rufus fed. And I hoped you'd come home. The word home landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading out in every direction. Why do you care? I asked. It came out harsher than I meant. You don't know me. I'm nobody. Dorothy's hand shot across the table and grabbed mine. Her palm was rough, calloused, warm, strong. You're Rose's daughter, she said fiercely. You're Thomas's granddaughter. You're the child who survived. That makes you somebody. That makes you family. I pulled my hand back. Couldn't help it. The word family had too many sharp edges. I should go, Dorothy said, reading my face. She stood, gathering her things. I'm 3 miles south if you need anything. The number's on the fridge. I meant what I said. You're not alone here, Cara. Not anymore. She was at the door when I found my voice. Dorothy? She turned. Thank you for the cinnamon rolls. For everything. Her smile was sad and sweet at the same time. Welcome home, dear. After she left, I sat at the table until my coffee went cold. Then I went upstairs to find the letters Thomas had mentioned in the video. They were in the bedroom across from mine. Not a bedroom, really. More like an office. A desk, a filing cabinet. Boxes stacked neatly against one wall. And on the desk, a banker's box with my name written on the side in Thomas's handwriting. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to Rose, all returned to sender, marked address unknown or returned to sender, or just sent back unopened. I pulled one out at random, dated December 2005, postmarked Cedar Falls. The handwriting was careful, precise, like Thomas had written and rewritten every word. Dear Rose, it's been 5 months. I don't know where you are. I don't know if you're safe. I don't know if you're eating enough or if you have a warm place to sleep. I don't know if the baby, my grandchild, is healthy. I don't know anything, and it's killing me. I'm sorry. I know I said that in the last letter and the letter before that, and it probably doesn't mean anything anymore. But I need you to know. I was wrong. I was scared and wrong, and I took my fear out on you. You deserved better. You've always deserved better. Please come home. Please let me help. Please let me tell you I'm sorry to your face. Love, Dad. I read 5 more letters, each one more desperate than the last. Thomas begging Rose to come back. Thomas promising to support whatever decision she made. Thomas saying he'd already started preparing a room for the baby. For me. Then the letters stopped. June 2006. After that, there were newspaper clippings. An obituary from a Sacramento paper. Rosemarie Brennan, 19, died Tuesday following a car accident. She is survived by her infant daughter, Carolina. But tucked between the clippings was another letter, this one in different handwriting. Shakier, younger. The return address said Sacramento General Hospital. The date was July 2006. My hands were trembling as I unfolded it. Dad, I don't have much time. They say I have maybe a week, maybe less. I need you to know I'm not angry anymore. I haven't been angry for a long time. I was scared. I was young and scared, and I wanted to prove I could do this alone. But I was wrong too. I'm sick, Dad. The doctors say it's pesticide poisoning. Organophosphate something. My liver is failing. They keep asking me about exposure, about what chemicals I used, but I didn't use anything. I swear I didn't. This farm was always organic. You taught me that. But something, I don't know. It doesn't matter now. What matters is Cara. She's 4 months old. She has red hair like me, and she smiles in her sleep. She's perfect, Dad. She's everything. I put her in the system because I couldn't. I'm not. I can't take care of her now. But please find her. Please bring her home. Please tell her I loved her. Please don't let her grow up thinking she wasn't wanted. I wanted her. I wanted her so much. I'm sorry I was too proud to come back. I'm sorry I wasted the time we could have had. I love you. I'm sorry. Please find Cara. Please. Rose. The letter was dated 2 weeks before the obituary. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it carefully, put it back in the box, and walked out of the room, down the stairs, out the front door, across the porch, into the yard where the grass was still dew-wet and the morning sun was burning off the last of the cool air. I walked until I couldn't see the house anymore, until I was standing in the middle of 80 acres of land that my grandfather had left me because my mother had asked him to find me, asked him to bring me home. And I screamed. All the anger I'd been carrying for 18 years, all the fear and loneliness and wondering why I wasn't enough for anyone to keep. All of it came out in one long, ragged sound that scattered birds from trees I couldn't name and sent Rufus running from the house to find me. He sat beside me while I cried, didn't try to comfort me, just sat, present, patient. When I was empty, I walked back to the house. I spent the rest of the morning exploring, really exploring, opening every drawer, every cabinet, every closet. The house revealed itself slowly. Thomas's clothes still hung in his bedroom closet. His razor sat on the bathroom sink. His reading glasses rested on a book on his nightstand, something about sustainable farming practices. In the living room, I found photo albums, dozens of them. Rose as a baby, Rose as a child, Rose as a teenager, the progression of a life, carefully documented. And then the photos stopped. No pictures of Rose pregnant, no pictures of Rose as a young mother, just a gap where that part of her life should have been. The last album had only a few photos. Me. Surveillance photos, I realized with a jolt. Thomas at St. Anne's. Me in the playground, maybe 10 years old, playing basketball with other kids. Me at 12, walking out of the building with a backpack. Me at 15, sitting on the front steps reading a book. He'd been watching all those years, just watching. The final photo was from last year. Me at 17, standing at the bus stop outside St. Anne's. The angle suggested Thomas had been in a car across the street. I was looking down at my phone, unaware I was being photographed, unaware I was being loved from a distance. Under the photo, Thomas had written in pencil, "She looks so much like Rose. I hope she's happy. I hope she knows she's wanted." I closed the album and sat on the couch that smelled faintly of old man and dog, and I let myself feel it. The loss of a mother I barely remembered. The loss of a grandfather I never got to meet. The loss of all the years we could have had together if fear and pride hadn't gotten in the way. By afternoon, I was hungry. The cinnamon rolls were long gone. I checked the refrigerator Dorothy had stocked. Eggs, cheese, vegetables I recognized, and some I didn't. I could make scrambled eggs. That was about the extent of my cooking skills. I was cracking eggs into a bowl when I heard a truck in the driveway. Not Dorothy's. This one was bigger, louder. Through the window, I saw a man climb out. Tall, broad-shouldered, maybe late 20s. Dark hair, work clothes covered in sawdust. He pulled a toolbox from the truck bed and headed toward the barn. I was out the door before I could think about it. "Hey," he turned, studied me for a moment. His face was weathered in the way that comes from working outside, lines around his eyes from squinting in the sun. He didn't smile. "You must be Cara," he said. His voice was deep, quiet. "Who are you?" "Nate Sullivan. I'm here to fix the barn door. Thomas hired me a month before he died. Door's been stuck since winter." "Oh." I felt stupid, standing there in my rumpled clothes, probably looking like I'd been crying, which I had been. I didn't know. Howard should have mentioned it. "I'll be out of your way in an hour." He turned back toward the barn, dismissing me. I should have gone inside. Instead, I followed. "Did you know my grandfather?" He paused at the barn door, set down his toolbox. "Some. He'd come into the hardware store in town. We talked farming, weather." A pause. "He talked about you. Toward the end." "What did he say?" Nate pulled out a screwdriver, examining the door hinges. "Said he had a granddaughter in California. Said he hoped she'd like it here." He glanced at me. "Do you?" "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "I just got here yesterday." He nodded like that made sense and went to work on the door. I watched him for a minute. His movements were efficient, practiced. He didn't waste motion. "Did you know my mother?" I asked. His hands stilled. "No. She was gone before I moved here. But Dorothy talked about her sometimes. Everyone seems to have known her except me." It came out more bitter than I intended. Nate looked at me then. Really looked. His eyes were brown, dark as the coffee Dorothy had brought. "That's not your fault," he said. "I know." "Do you?" The question was gentle, but it hit something raw. I turned away, heading back toward the house. "I didn't mean," he started. "It's fine," I cut him off. "Do whatever you need to do with the door." I went inside and finished making eggs I didn't want to eat anymore. Through the window, I watched Nate work. He was there for 2 hours, not one. When he finished, he loaded his tools back into the truck, but didn't leave immediately. Instead, he walked to where Rufus was lying in the shade and crouched down, scratching behind the dog's ears. They stayed like that for a minute, man and dog, both comfortable in the silence. Then Nate stood and headed to the front door. He knocked. I considered not answering. Answered anyway. "Door's fixed," he said. "And the latch on the back gate. It was about to fall off. I didn't ask you to fix that. Thomas would have wanted it done." We stood there in awkward silence. Then he shifted his weight and offered what might have been the ghost of a smile. "Listen, I shouldn't have said what I said about it not being your fault. That was..." "True," I offered. The smile became more real. "Yeah, but pushy. Dorothy says I have a problem with that." "Dorothy seems to say a lot of things." "She does. Usually she's right." He gestured toward his truck. You know Rufus ate half your scrambled eggs this morning, right? I saw it through the window when I was fixing the barn door. I stopped short. What? He was sitting right there looking innocent. Golden retrievers are excellent actors. It's in their DNA. Despite everything, despite the anger and confusion and grief, I laughed. Just a short bark of sound, but real. Nate's expression softened. There it is. I was starting to think you'd forgotten how. Forgotten what? How to laugh. Something about the way he said it, not pitying, just observant, made my throat tight. I should go, he said. I'll send Howard the invoice. Welcome to Cedar Falls, Cara. He was in his truck and halfway down the driveway before I realized I hadn't thanked him. That evening, Dorothy called. Just checking in, she said, making sure you have everything you need. I'm fine. Nate said he fixed the barn door. News travels fast here. She laughed. It's a small town, dear. Everyone knows everyone. And everyone's curious about Thomas Hart's granddaughter from California. Great. That's exactly what I needed. To be the subject of small-town gossip. Don't worry, Dorothy said, reading my silence. They mean well, mostly. Though you should probably come into town tomorrow. Let people meet you before the rumors get too wild. What kind of rumors? Oh, you know, that you're planning to sell the farm, that you're some kind of city girl who's never seen a cow, that you're too young to manage 80 acres. She paused. There's a woman, Vivian Ashford. She runs the Historical Society. She's been asking questions. Something in Dorothy's tone made me pay attention. What kind of questions? About your plans, about whether you're staying, about... She hesitated. About your mother. Why would she ask about my mother? I don't know, dear, but Vivian Ashford is the kind of woman who likes to know everyone's business. And she has a long memory. Just be careful around her. That's all. After we hung up, I stood at the kitchen sink watching the sun set over fields that belonged to me. Rufus sat at my feet, leaning his weight against my legs. Tomorrow, I'd go into town, meet the people who'd known my mother and grandfather, face whatever rumors were already spreading about the city girl who'd inherited Thomas Hart's farm. But tonight, I had this house to myself. These rooms full of my mother's ghost and my grandfather's guilt and a kind of loneliness that felt different from the loneliness I'd known before. This loneliness had roots, had history, had my name carved into it. I remembered Rufus's interest in the barn earlier, the way he'd pawed at a particular spot near the back corner. Maybe tomorrow I'd investigate. See if there was something Thomas had hidden there. Something else waiting to be found. But tonight, I just needed to sleep. I went upstairs with Rufus following. For the first time, I let him jump onto the bed. He curled against my side, warm and solid and real. Outside, the Nebraska night was full of sounds I didn't know yet. Insects, wind and grass. The distant call of something that might have been an owl. And somewhere in this darkness, in this town that had welcomed me with cinnamon rolls and suspicion in equal measure, were answers about my mother. Answers I was going to find. Tomorrow, Cedar Falls looked like every small Nebraska town I'd seen from the bus window. One main street, American flags hanging from lampposts, pickup trucks angled into parking spaces like they'd been there since morning. The difference was that now I had to get out and walk through it. Had to let people see me. Had to pretend I belonged. I dressed carefully. Jeans and a t-shirt, nothing fancy. Hair pulled back. No makeup because I didn't own any. I looked like what I was, a girl from California who didn't know the first thing about farming or small towns or what to say when people stared. And they did stare. The woman coming out of the post office paused mid-step when she saw me. An old man sitting on a bench outside the hardware store watched me walk by with eyes that felt like they were cataloging everything. My clothes, my walk, the California plates on the truck I'd borrowed from the barn. Dorothy had insisted I take Thomas's old Ford. "Yours now," she'd said when she'd driven over that morning with fresh bread and the keys. "Everything of his is yours, dear. Might as well start using it." I parked in front of a place called Miller's General Store. Through the window, I could see shelves stocked with everything from canned goods to fishing tackle. A bell chimed when I pushed open the door. The woman behind the counter looked up. She was maybe 60, gray hair cut short, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. Her smile was automatic, professional. Then she saw my face, and the smile faltered. "My God," she whispered, "you're Rose's daughter." I'd expected curiosity. I hadn't expected recognition so immediate it felt like a slap. "Cara Brennan," I said, forcing my voice steady. "I just inherited Thomas Hart's farm." "I know who you are, honey." She came around the counter, moving fast for someone her age. "I'm Jean Miller. I knew your mother. Knew her well." Her eyes were wet. "Lord, you look just like her. It's like seeing a ghost." I didn't know what to say to that. John didn't seem to notice. "I heard you were coming. Dorothy called me yesterday. Said Thomas left you the farm." She shook her head. "That man. He loved that girl so much. Broke his heart when she left. Broke it worse when he found out she'd died." "Did you know my mother well?" I asked. "Well enough. She used to come in here after school, buy penny candy, and tell me about whatever book she was reading. Smart girl, kind, always had a smile." Jean's expression shifted, something darker moving behind her eyes. "What happened to her was a damn shame." "What did happen to her?" The question came out harder than I meant. Jean blinked, stepping back slightly. "Car accident, wasn't it? That's what Thomas said." "That's what the obituary said," I corrected, "but the medical records say something different." Jean's face went carefully blank. "I don't know anything about that." She was lying. I could see it in the way her hands moved to straighten items on the counter that didn't need straightening. In the way she wouldn't quite meet my eyes. "If you know something," I started. The bell chimed again. A woman walked in, and Jean's expression flooded with relief. "Vivienne, come meet Thomas Hart's granddaughter." The woman who entered looked like she'd stepped out of a catalog for expensive casual wear. Late 50s, blonde hair styled perfectly, linen pants and a silk blouse that probably cost more than everything I owned. She moved with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. Her eyes found me and stayed there, assessing. "Carolina Brennan," she said. Not a question, a statement. "I'm Vivienne Ashford. I run the Historical Society here in Cedar Falls. I've been hoping to meet you." Her handshake was firm, cool. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "I wanted to extend my condolences about Thomas," she continued. "He was a pillar of this community. His death was a great loss." "Did you know him well?" I asked. "As well as anyone, I suppose. Cedar Falls is a small town. We all know each other." She released my hand. I understand you're planning to stay at the farm? For now. She picked up a basket, began selecting items with the careful precision of someone who'd never had to check price tags. 80 acres is a lot of land for one person, especially someone with no farming experience. I'll learn. Of course. Her tone suggested she didn't believe that for a second. You know, if you decide the farm is too much responsibility, there are people who'd be interested in purchasing it. I could put you in touch with some reputable buyers, save you the trouble of... I'm not selling. The words came out flat, final. Vivian's smile tightened at the edges. Well, the offer stands if you change your mind. She moved toward the counter where Jean was watching our exchange with obvious discomfort. Jean, I need to speak with you about the Heritage Festival Committee meeting. Do you have a moment? It was a dismissal. I'd been around enough foster parents who didn't want me to recognize one. I left the store without buying anything. Outside, I stood on the sidewalk trying to slow my breathing. The anger felt too big for my body, like it might crack my ribs from the inside. That woman, Vivian Ashford, had looked at me like I was a problem to be solved. An inconvenience. Like I didn't belong here. Don't let her get to you. I turned. Nate Sullivan was leaning against his truck 2 spaces down, arms crossed. He must have watched me storm out of the store. How long have you been standing there? Long enough to see you meet Vivian. He pushed off the truck, walked over. She does that to everyone. Acts like she owns the town. Does she? Basically. Her husband did anyway. Before he died. Nate studied my face. You look like you need coffee. I need answers. Coffee first, answers after. There's a diner across the street. Food's decent, and the owner minds her own business. I should have said no. Should have gotten back in the truck and driven to the farm and figured this out alone like I'd figured out everything else in my life. Instead, I followed him across the street. The diner was called Rosie's, which felt like some kind of cosmic joke. Inside, it was all red vinyl booths and black and white checkered floors. A woman in her 40s looked up from behind the counter, her face breaking into a smile when she saw Nate. Twice in 1 week, Nate Sullivan? What's the occasion? Then she saw me and the smile transformed into something softer. Oh my. You're Thomas's granddaughter. Does everyone in this town know who I am? I asked. Pretty much, she said cheerfully. I'm Patty. Any family of Thomas Hart's gets free coffee for life. Sit wherever you want. We slid into a booth by the window. Patty brought coffee without being asked, along with 2 slices of apple pie I definitely hadn't ordered. On the house, she said when I tried to protest. Your grandfather used to come in here every Sunday morning for 10 years, sat right where you're sitting, read the paper, drank terrible coffee, never complained once. Her eyes got misty. He was a good man. I'm sorry you didn't get to know him. After she left, Nate pushed one of the pie slices toward me. Eat. You look like you haven't had a decent meal since you got here. How would you know? Dorothy called my mom. Who called me? Who said you need to eat more? I stared at him. Does everyone in this town talk about everyone else? Yes. He took a bite of his pie. Get used to it. I picked up my fork, more to have something to do with my hands than because I was hungry. The pie was good, sweet and tart and still warm. We ate in silence for a minute. What do you know about Vivian Ashford? I asked finally. Nate set down his fork. Why? She knew my mother, and she's lying about something. I can feel it. Vivienne lies about a lot of things. He leaned back, considering. Her husband was Gregory Ashford. He owned Ashford Chemical, big operation, sold pesticides and fertilizers to farms all over the state. He died about 14 years ago. Heart attack. Vivienne inherited everything. Pesticides. The word made my stomach clench. Did my mother know Gregory Ashford? Everyone knew Gregory. He was... Nate paused, choosing words carefully. He was influential, gave money to the town, sponsored events, sat on the council, the kind of guy who made sure you knew how important he was. What aren't you telling me? His eyes met mine, brown and steady and hiding something. There were rumors, he said slowly, before I moved here, about Ashford Chemical dumping waste improperly, contaminating groundwater. People got sick, but nothing was ever proven. Gregory had lawyers, had money, had friends in the EPA and the county health department. My hands were shaking. I set down my fork before I dropped it. My mother died of pesticide poisoning. Nate went very still. What? I found her medical records. Organophosphate poisoning. The doctors said it wasn't accidental. I watched his face. And Thomas knew. He spent years trying to prove someone killed her. Jesus. Nate ran a hand through his hair. Does Dorothy know? I don't think so. She never mentioned it. You need to talk to her. She was here when Rose... He stopped. She might know things. Or she might be protecting whoever did it. The words hung between us. Nate's expression shifted, something like anger moving across his features. Dorothy wouldn't protect a killer. She's one of the best people I know. Everyone's protecting something in this town, I said. Everyone's got secrets. Jean Miller knew something and wouldn't tell me. Vivienne Ashford wants me gone. And my mother died from poison that came from somewhere. I stood up, suddenly desperate to get out of this diner with its free pie and its pity. Where are you going? Nate asked. To talk to Dorothy. Cara, wait. But I was already out the door. I drove to Dorothy's house too fast, gravel spitting from the truck tires. Her place was smaller than Thomas's farm, a modest ranch house with flower beds that looked like they required constant care. Her truck was in the driveway. She answered the door with flour on her hands and surprise on her face. Cara, I wasn't expecting... Is everything all right? Did you know my mother was poisoned? All the color drained from Dorothy's face. She gripped the door frame. What? Pesticide poisoning. Organophosphate. The medical records are clear. It wasn't a car accident. I was shaking now. Anger and fear mixing into something that tasted like copper. Thomas knew. He spent years trying to prove it. Did you know? Dorothy's mouth opened. Closed. She looked 10 years older than she had 2 days ago. Come inside, she whispered. Her kitchen was warm, smelling of whatever she'd been baking. She gestured to the table, but didn't sit herself. Just stood there, hands twisted in her apron, looking at me like I was a bomb about to explode. I knew, she said finally. Not at first. Not when Rose died, but later, years later. Thomas told me what he'd found, and you didn't think I should know? I thought, her voice cracked, I thought it would hurt you. I thought it was better to let you believe it was an accident. Better? The word came out like a bark. My mother was murdered, and you thought it was better to lie to me? I didn't lie. I just didn't. Tell me everything you know. Right now. Dorothy sank into a chair. She looked frail suddenly, breakable. But I couldn't feel sorry for her. Not yet. Rose came home in July 2005, Dorothy began. 7 months pregnant. She and Thomas fought. Terrible things were said on both sides. She left that night, came to my house crying. I gave her money for a bus ticket, told her to call when she got somewhere safe. She called. Once, from Sacramento. Said she'd found a room. Said she was going to have the baby and figure things out. I begged her to come back. She said she couldn't. Not yet. That she needed time. Dorothy's hands were shaking. That was the last time I spoke to her. What happened? She had you in March. I got a letter from her in April. She sent a picture. You were this tiny thing with red hair. She said she was working as a waitress. Said it was hard, but she was managing. She sounded happy. Or trying to be. Dorothy stood, went to a drawer, pulled out an envelope. Inside was a photograph. Rose, looking exhausted but smiling, holding a baby. Me, on the back. Cara at 1 month. She's perfect. I wish you could meet her. Love, Rose. I stared at the photo, at my mother's face, at the way she held me like I was made of glass. She sent one more letter in June, Dorothy continued. Said she was feeling sick. Thought it was just stress. But by July, she was in the hospital. I didn't know. Thomas didn't know. We found out after she died. And the poisoning? Dorothy closed her eyes. Thomas got the medical records in 2008. He was obsessed by then, spent thousands on private investigators. The records showed organophosphate poisoning. But Rose was living in Sacramento. She wasn't anywhere near farms or chemicals. So Thomas started asking questions. What did he find? That Rose came back to Cedar Falls once, in May 2006. She didn't tell anyone, but someone saw her at the farm. She was only here for a day, maybe less. Thomas was in Omaha visiting his sister. When he got back, he found signs someone had been in the house. He thought it was teenagers. He didn't realize it was Rose until years later. My throat was tight. She came back? I think she wanted to see the farm, to show you where she grew up. She didn't stay because Thomas wasn't there. But someone knew she'd been here. Dorothy's voice dropped to a whisper. And someone wanted to make sure she didn't come back again. Who? Dorothy looked at me with eyes full of guilt and fear and something else I couldn't name. Gregory Ashford, and maybe others. People who'd been paid to keep quiet about the chemical dumping. Rose had been asking questions before she left. About contamination on the farm. About why some of the neighbors' wells tested positive for toxins. She was going to report it. And then she got pregnant and left. And everyone thought the problem went away with her. But she came back. She came back. And someone made sure she'd never be able to testify. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table. You've known this for years, and you said nothing? I had no proof, Dorothy's voice broke. Gregory Ashford was the most powerful man in 3 counties. He had the sheriff in his pocket, the county health department. Everyone who could have investigated was either paid off or too scared to cross him. Thomas tried. He tried everything. But Gregory died in 2010, and everyone who might have known the truth either left town or took the secret to their graves. What about Vivienne? What about her? Did she know? Did she help her husband cover it up? Dorothy's silence was answer enough. I stood so fast my chair scraped across the floor. I'm going to prove it. I'm going to find out what happened, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows what they did. Cara, please. Did you take money to keep quiet? The question stopped her cold. Dorothy's face went white as bone. What? Did Gregory Ashford pay you to stay silent? Is that why you didn't tell anyone Rose had been poisoned? Is that why you've been taking care of Thomas's farm like it's some kind of penance? Cara, I would never. $10,000, I said, the number coming from something I'd glimpsed in Thomas's notes. That's what he paid most people. Was it more for you? Less? How much was my mother's life worth? Dorothy's hand went to her mouth. Tears spilled over. Yes, she whispered. He gave me $10,000. The admission hit like a physical blow. I'd been expecting denial. Some excuse, not this raw confession. It was 2006. My husband had just died. I had medical bills. I had a mortgage. I was drowning. The words came out in gasps between sobs. Gregory came to my house the night after Rose's funeral. He said Rose had been asking dangerous questions, that she'd accused his company of illegal dumping. He said if I testified about seeing her at the farm, if I told anyone she'd been back, it would open investigations that would destroy Cedar Falls, that people would lose their jobs, that the town would die. So you took the money. I took the money, and I've hated myself every day since. Dorothy was crying openly now, mascara running down her face. I was there, Cara. I was at the farm that day Rose came back. I saw her walking the fields with you in a carrier on her chest. She was talking to you, telling you about the corn, about how her father grew the best corn in the county. She looked happy. She looked like she might stay. Why didn't you talk to her? I was going to. I started across the field, but then I saw a truck coming up the driveway. Ashford Chemical logo on the side. I hid. I was a coward. I watched them spray something on the fields and leave. I watched Rose walk back to her car an hour later, not knowing she'd just been exposed to poison. And you said nothing. I said nothing. I took the money. I stayed quiet at the inquest. I let them rule it an accident. And I've lived with that guilt for 18 years. We stood there in her kitchen, separated by 3 feet, and a betrayal that felt infinite. You let my mother die, I said. My voice didn't sound like my own. You let me grow up without her. For $10,000. I know. I don't want to see you again. Cara, please. But I was already walking to the door, to the truck, driving away from that house and the woman who'd seemed like she might be family, but was just another person who'd chosen money over truth. I drove without seeing. The fields blurred past. The sky was too big, too blue, too indifferent. When I finally pulled over, I was somewhere I didn't recognize. Just a dirt road cutting through farmland. I got out and walked into the field until I was surrounded by corn so tall I couldn't see over it. And I screamed again. The same scream from 2 days ago, but different now. Not just grief, not just anger. This was rage with a target, with names, with faces. Gregory Ashford had poisoned my mother. Vivienne had helped him cover it up. Dorothy had taken money to stay quiet. and an entire town had looked the other way while my mother died, and I was put into a system that broke me in ways I was still discovering. When the screaming stopped, I was hoarse, empty. The corn rustled in the wind, indifferent to my pain. My phone buzzed, a text from Nate. "Where are you?" Dorothy called. "She's worried." I turned off my phone. The sun was setting by the time I made it back to the farm. Rufus met me at the door, tail wagging, oblivious to the fact that the world had just cracked open. I fed him, remembered his interest in the barn yesterday. I needed to do something. Anything. Find something. I grabbed a flashlight and went to the barn, found the spot where Rufus had been pawing. The trap door was there, just like I'd suspected. Heavy, rusted at the hinges. It took all my strength to pull it open. Below was a room I never knew existed. Not a basement, more like a bunker. Concrete walls, metal shelving, and boxes. Dozens of them, labeled in Thomas's careful handwriting. Rose, medical, chemical reports, witness statements, evidence 2006 to 2024. This was where he'd kept his investigation. Hidden, protected, waiting for me. I spent the next 3 hours bringing boxes up to the house, one by one. Medical records, chemical analyses, witness statements that people had later recanted. A map showing properties affected by Ashford Chemical's dumping. Names of people who'd gotten sick. Names of people who'd been paid to stay quiet. And at the bottom of one box, a journal. Thomas's handwriting, dated entries spanning from 2008 to 2024. I opened to a random page, 2015. I saw Cara today. She's 10 years old, and she looks so much like Rose, it breaks my heart. She was playing basketball in the yard at St. Anne's. She missed a shot and got angry at herself. That's Rose, too. That perfectionism. That fire. I wanted to walk across the street and tell her who I am. Tell her she has family. Tell her she's loved. But I'm a coward. I'm the man who drove Rose away. The man who couldn't protect her. I don't deserve to be her grandfather. So I'll watch. I'll plan. I'll make sure she has a home, even if I can't be here to give it to her. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all I can do. I read until I couldn't see through tears. Read until the words blurred together. Read until I understood that Thomas had spent 16 years trying to give me what he'd failed to give my mother. A home. Safety. Justice. He'd failed at the last one. The people who'd killed Rose had never been held accountable. Had lived free while my mother died and I grew up alone. But I was 18 now, old enough to ask questions, old enough to demand answers. And I had 80 acres, a house full of evidence, and nothing left to lose. Tomorrow, I'd start asking questions that people didn't want to answer. Tomorrow, I'd make Cedar Falls remember what they'd done. Tomorrow, I'd get justice for Rose Brennan, even if I had to burn this whole town down to do it. I didn't sleep. Instead, I read every document in Thomas's boxes until dawn light leaked through the windows. By the time Rufus started whining to go out, I had a list of 17 names. 17 people who'd taken money from Gregory Ashford to stay quiet about contaminated wells, illegal dumping, and my mother's death. 12 were still alive. 8 still lived in Cedar Falls. I was going to talk to every single one. The first name on the list was Earl Patterson, who'd been Cedar Falls' sheriff in 2006. He'd retired in 2010, right after Gregory Ashford died. According to Thomas's notes, he'd received $5,000 to rule Rose's death accidental without investigation. He lived on Maple Street in a house with peeling paint and a yard full of weeds. I knocked at 7 in the morning, kept knocking until a man in his 70s opened the door wearing a bathrobe and an expression of extreme irritation. "What the hell do you want?" "I'm Cara Brennan. Rose Brennan was my mother." His face went gray. He tried to close the door. I blocked it with my foot. "We can talk here, or I can start asking questions at the town meeting next week. Your choice." He stared at me for a long moment. Then he stepped back and let me in. His living room smelled like stale coffee and cigarettes. We didn't sit. "I don't know what you think you know," he said. I pulled out a photocopy of Thomas's ledger. $5,000, June 2006. Paid by Gregory Ashford through an LLC called Nebraska Agricultural Holdings. You closed the investigation into my mother's death 48 hours after it was opened. Ruled it accidental without ordering toxicology or requesting an inquest. She died in California. She was poisoned in Nebraska, in Cedar Falls, on my grandfather's farm. And you knew it." His jaw worked. "I don't have to talk to you." "No, but you'll have to talk to the state attorney general when I file a wrongful death lawsuit naming you as a co-conspirator. Gregory Ashford is dead, but you're not, and neither is Vivienne. You can't prove anything. I have medical records, chemical analysis of the farm soil showing organophosphate contamination from Ashford Chemical products, witness statements, including one from Dorothy Whitmore, placing my mother at the farm in May 2006, and I have Thomas Hart's investigation showing a pattern of payoffs to county officials. I was bluffing. Dorothy's confession wasn't in writing. Most of Thomas's evidence was circumstantial, but Earl Patterson didn't know that. He sat down heavily. "What do you want?" "The truth, on record, in writing. If I do that, they'll come after me." "Who's they?" He laughed bitterly. "You think Gregory worked alone? Half the county government was on his payroll. The health department, the EPA inspector, the county commissioners. You start digging this up, you'll find out just how deep the corruption went. Then help me dig." We stared at each other. Finally, he nodded. "I'll write it down. What I know. What I was paid to ignore. But I want immunity." "I'm not a prosecutor." "Then get me one who'll listen. Otherwise, I'm not saying a word." I left with his promise to write a statement and the sinking realization that this was bigger than I'd thought. Not just one dead mother. A whole system designed to protect the people who'd killed her. By the time I got back to the farm, there were 3 messages on my phone. One from Dorothy, apologizing again. One from Nate, asking if I was okay. And one from a number I didn't recognize. I called it back. Howard Mitchell's office. The lawyer. I'd almost forgotten about him. "This is Cara Brennan. You called?" "Miss Brennan, yes. I received some concerning information this morning. Vivienne Ashford has filed a challenge to Thomas's will." The world tilted. "What?" "She's claiming the property transfer was made under duress. That Thomas wasn't of sound mind when he changed his will. She's requesting the court invalidate the bequest and distribute the estate according to Nebraska's intestacy laws. Can she do that? She can try. The filing is weak. I have video evidence of Thomas's mental competency from our meetings, but it will tie up the estate in probate for months, maybe longer." He paused. Miss Brennan, may I ask what you've been doing the last 24 hours? Asking questions about my mother's death. His sigh was heavy. I was afraid of that. Vivienne Ashford doesn't like questions. This legal challenge is her way of warning you to stop. I'm not going to stop. Then you should know what you're up against. Vivienne has resources, connections. She's on the hospital board, the county planning commission, the historical society. She can make your life in Cedar Falls very difficult. She already killed my mother. How much more difficult can it get? Silence on the line. Then, quietly, Thomas believed the same thing about Vivian's involvement. He could never prove it. I will. Be careful, Miss Brennan. Thomas Hart had nothing left to lose. You have 80 acres and a future. Don't throw it away on a fight you can't win. After he hung up, I sat on the porch steps with Rufus's head in my lap and tried to decide if Howard was giving advice or a warning. That's when Nate's truck pulled into the driveway. He got out slowly, hands visible, like he was approaching something dangerous. Maybe he was. You want to tell me why half the town is talking about you threatening Earl Patterson? I didn't threaten him. I asked for the truth. Cara. He sat down on the steps beside me, not touching, just present. What are you doing? What Thomas couldn't. Finding out who killed my mother. And then what? You think the truth will bring her back? You think exposing Vivian Ashford will make Cedar Falls accept you? I don't care if they accept me. Yes, you do. His voice was gentle. You care so much it's eating you alive. You want to belong here. You want this to be home. But you're burning every bridge before you even cross it. They burned the bridges. They killed my mother and covered it up and took money to forget about it. I'm just asking them to remember. At what cost? I turned to look at him. Really look. He had sawdust in his hair, tired eyes, hands scarred from work. Why do you care? I asked. Because Dorothy called me crying this morning. Because Earl Patterson's wife called my mom asking what kind of girl was harassing her husband. Because I know what it's like to lose someone and want someone to blame. Your wife, he nodded. Sarah. She was sick for 2 years before she died. Cancer. I spent those 2 years angry. Angry at doctors who couldn't save her. Angry at God for letting it happen. Angry at her for leaving me. And after she died, I was so focused on being angry that I almost forgot to grieve. This is different, is it? Because from where I'm sitting, you're choosing rage over healing, just like I did. I don't want to heal. I want justice. You can't have both? The question hung in the air. Rufus shifted, licking my hand. They took everything from me, I said, and my voice cracked. My mother, my childhood, the family I should have had. And they got away with it. They're still here, living their lives, while I grew up in group homes wondering why no one wanted me. So no, I don't think I can just forgive and move on. I don't think I should have to. I'm not asking you to forgive. I'm asking you to be smart. Nate shifted, turning to face me fully. You want justice? Then you need allies. You need people who'll testify. You need the town on your side, not against you. The town chose its side 18 years ago. Some of them did, not all. He stood, offered me his hand. Come with me. There's someone you should meet. I didn't take his hand, but I followed him to his truck. We drove 15 minutes out of town to a house surrounded by cornfields. An old woman sat on the porch in a rocking chair, a blanket over her legs despite the heat. She watched us approach with sharp eyes. "Nate Sullivan," she called. "You bring me Thomas Hart's granddaughter?" "Yes, ma'am. Cara, this is Helen Price. She was on the county health board in 2006. Helen gestured to the chairs beside her. Up close, I could see she was ancient, 90, maybe older, but her gaze was clear. "I knew your mother," she said without preamble. Smart girl, passionate about environmental issues. She came to me in 2005 before she left, said she had evidence of contamination on several farms, wanted me to order testing. My heart was pounding. "What did you do?" "I ordered the tests, found organophosphate levels 20 times the legal limit in 3 wells, found chemical residue in soil samples from 5 farms, including your grandfather's. I was preparing a report when Gregory Ashford came to see me." "Did he offer you money?" Her laugh was bitter. "No. He threatened to have me removed from the board. Said I was causing panic with inconclusive data. Said if I released the report, he'd sue me personally for defamation." She pulled the blanket tighter. I was 68, about to retire. I didn't release the report. Do you still have it? "In my attic, along with every piece of evidence I collected. I kept it all. Told myself someday I'd find the courage to make it public." She looked at me. "I never did. I'm 93 years old, and I've been a coward for 26 years. But maybe you're braver than I was. Can I have the report?" "You can have all of it. On one condition." "What?" "You don't do this alone. You get a lawyer. A real one, not Howard Mitchell. He's too worried about his reputation. You file proper complaints with the EPA and the state attorney general. You do this right, or you don't do it at all. Because Gregory Ashford is dead, but his money isn't. Vivian will fight you with every resource she has. And she has a lot." Nate leaned forward. "There's something else you should know. Gregory Ashford died of a heart attack, but the week before he died, Thomas Hart confronted him publicly at a town meeting, accused him of poisoning Rose. Gregory denied it, had Thomas escorted out by security." "I never knew that," I whispered. "Not many people do. It was hushed up, but I was there." Helen's expression hardened. "Gregory had a heart attack 2 days later. Massive. He was dead before the ambulance arrived. Some people said it was karma. Others said it was stress from Thomas's accusations. But I always wondered if it was guilt. Or fear," Nate added quietly. "Fear that the truth was finally going to come out." I sat back, processing. Thomas had confronted Gregory, had been escorted out, had watched the man who killed his daughter die 2 days later without ever facing justice. No wonder he'd spent the next 14 years collecting evidence. He'd lost his chance at public accountability. He'd been trying to give me the tools to finish what he started. "I'll take the report," I said to Helen, "and I'll do it right." She nodded. "Nate, help me up. The boxes are in the attic." It took an hour to bring everything down. 4 boxes full of water test results, soil analyses, medical records from people who'd gotten sick, correspondence between Helen and the EPA that had gone nowhere. And at the bottom of the last box, a folder labeled Rose Brennan, May 2006. Inside were photographs. Rose at the farm, carrying me in a baby carrier. Rose kneeling in the field, touching the soil. Rose standing by the barn, looking toward the house with an expression of such longing it hurt to see. "Who took these?" I asked. "I did," Helen said. "I was conducting field research that day. I saw her there. I didn't know who she was until later. After she died, I couldn't bring myself to throw them away." I stared at the photos. My mother, alive, here, standing on the land that was now mine. "Thank you," I managed. Back in Nate's truck with the boxes loaded in the bed, I finally let myself cry. Not angry tears, not grief tears, something else. Relief, maybe. That I wasn't alone in this. That there were people who'd been waiting 18 years to tell the truth. "You okay?" Nate asked. "No, but I will be." I wiped my eyes. "I need to call Dorothy." "Yeah?" "Yeah, I was wrong about her. She's not the enemy. She's a victim who made a bad choice. Just like Helen. Just like Earl Patterson." I looked at the boxes in the truck bed. "The real enemy is the system that made them all so scared they'd rather stay silent than risk everything. And Vivian? Vivian made a choice too. But hers was different. She chose power over truth. She's still choosing it." I pulled out my phone. "She wants a fight? I'll give her one. But I'm going to do it the right way." Dorothy answered on the first ring. "Cara?" "I'm sorry," I said. "For what I said yesterday. You made a mistake, but you're trying to make it right. That's more than a lot of people have done." Her sob was audible. "Oh, sweetheart. I need your help. I need you to testify about what you saw, about Gregory's payment, about everything. Yes, of course, anything. And I need you to help me plan a town meeting, a real one, where everyone can hear the truth." Silence. Then, "Vivian will try to stop you. Let her try." After I hung up, Nate was smiling. "What?" I asked. "Nothing. You sounded like Thomas just then. Stubborn, determined, ready to fight the whole world if you have to. Is that a compliment?" "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, it is." We drove back to the farm in comfortable silence. The sun was setting, painting the fields gold. For the first time since I'd arrived in Cedar Falls, the land didn't feel foreign. It felt like it was waiting, like it had been waiting for me all along, like it might actually be home. The town meeting was scheduled for the first Tuesday in July. Dorothy helped me reserve the community center. Howard Mitchell helped me file formal complaints with the EPA and the Nebraska Attorney General's office. And Nate helped me organize Helen Price's evidence into something presentable. But Vivian Ashford didn't wait quietly. 3 days before the meeting, the Cedar Falls Gazette ran a front-page story. Questions raised about Hart estate transfer. It suggested Thomas had been suffering from dementia when he changed his will. It quoted anonymous sources saying I was a troubled youth with a history of behavioral problems in foster care. It painted me as an outsider trying to destroy the town's reputation for personal gain. I read it twice and then threw the paper in the trash. "Don't let it get to you," Dorothy said. She'd been at the farm every day, helping me prepare. "Vivian's scared. People only attack when they're afraid of losing." "She's winning, though. Look at this." I showed her my phone. The town meeting Facebook event had 200 comments, most of them hostile. People saying I should leave Cedar Falls alone, that I was disrespecting Thomas's memory, that I was dragging up old pain for attention. "They'll listen when they hear the evidence," Dorothy said, but she didn't sound convinced. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. I went downstairs at 2 in the morning and found Nate on the porch. He was sitting in Thomas's rocking chair, Rufus at his feet. Couldn't sleep either? I asked. He shook his head. Been thinking about what you said, about choosing rage over healing. I sat in the chair beside him. And? I think maybe you were right. After Sarah died, I was so angry I pushed everyone away. My parents, my friends, anyone who tried to help. He was quiet for a moment. I don't want you to make the same mistake. I'm not pushing people away. Aren't you? He turned to look at me. Dorothy's trying to help, and you barely speak to her. I'm trying to help, and you act like you're doing this alone. Even Rufus, you pet him, but you won't let him sleep in your room because you're afraid of getting attached. The observation stung because it was true. I've spent 18 years learning not to get attached, I said. People leave. That's what they do. Not everyone. Everyone I have ever known. Not Thomas. He spent 16 years planning for you. Not Dorothy. She's been waiting for you since before you were born. Not me. He said it quietly. I'm not going anywhere, Cara. Something in my chest cracked open. Why? You don't even know me? I know you're brave and stubborn, and you care so much about justice, it's eating you alive. I know you make scrambled eggs for breakfast, and you talk to Rufus like he understands every word. I know you cry when you read your mother's letters, but you won't let anyone see. He smiled slightly. That's enough to know I want to stick around. I didn't know what to say to that, so I reached over and took his hand. His fingers were calloused, warm, solid, real. We sat like that until the sun came up. The community center was packed, every seat filled, people standing along the walls. I recognized faces from Miller's General Store, from Rosie's Diner, from the sidewalks of Cedar Falls. They watched me walk to the front with expressions ranging from curiosity to hostility. Vivian Ashford sat in the front row, perfectly composed. Beside her were two men in suits, lawyers, obviously. Howard Mitchell squeezed my shoulder as I passed. Remember, stick to the facts. Don't get emotional. Don't let her bait you. I nodded and stepped up to the microphone. Thank you for coming, I started. My voice shook. I steadied it. My name is Cara Brennan. Most of you know me as Thomas Hart's granddaughter. What you might not know is that I'm also Rose Brennan's daughter. A murmur ran through the crowd. I saw recognition on some faces, guilt on others. Rose died in August 2006 when I was 4 months old. The official cause of death was listed as complications from a car accident, but that was a lie. This is outrageous. Vivienne stood. Let her speak, someone called from the back. I was shocked to see it was John Miller. We should hear what she has to say. Vivienne sat down, lips pressed into a thin line. I took a breath and continued. Rose died of organophosphate poisoning, pesticide poisoning. The medical records are clear. She was exposed sometime in May 2006 when she made a secret trip back to Cedar Falls. She came to see the farm where she grew up, to show me the place that should have been my home. I projected the medical records on the screen behind me. Helen Price had helped me prepare the presentation. While she was here, someone from Ashford Chemical sprayed illegal pesticides on my grandfather's property. Rose was exposed. 3 months later, she was dead. Her liver failed. She died alone in a hospital in California while I was placed in foster care. The room was completely silent now. My grandfather, Thomas Hart, spent 16 years investigating her death. He collected evidence. I clicked through images, soil tests, water analyses, witness statements. He found that Ashford Chemical had been illegally dumping pesticides for years, that wells all over Cedar Falls were contaminated, that people got sick, and that Gregory Ashford paid county officials to cover it up. You have no proof Gregory was responsible, Vivian said coldly. Actually, I do. I nodded to Dorothy. She stood, visibly shaking, but her voice was steady. In June 2006, Gregory Ashford gave me $10,000 to stay quiet about seeing Rose at the farm. He told me if I testified about what I saw, about the chemical truck, about the spraying, it would destroy Cedar Falls. I took the money. I've regretted it every day since. The gasps were audible. People turned to stare at Dorothy. She kept her eyes on me. I'm not the only one, she continued. Gregory paid 17 people to keep quiet. I'm prepared to name them all and to provide bank records showing the payments. This is slander, Vivian hissed. My husband is dead. He can't defend himself against these baseless accusations. Then let's look at the evidence, I said. I clicked to the next slide, Helen Price's report. In 2005, the County Health Board conducted environmental testing around Cedar Falls. They found dangerous levels of contamination on multiple properties. This is the report Gregory Ashford threatened to suppress, the report that would have saved my mother's life if it had been released. Helen Price stood from where she sat in the third row. I wrote that report. Gregory Ashford threatened to sue me and have me removed from the board if I released it. I was a coward. I stayed silent. But I kept every piece of evidence, and I'm giving it to the state attorney general. The room erupted. People shouting questions, arguing with their neighbors. I saw Earl Patterson in the back, head down. Saw others who were probably on Thomas's list of 17, faces pale with fear or shame. Vivian stood, her composure finally cracking. This is a witch hunt. You're trying to destroy my family's reputation based on hearsay and conjecture. You have no direct evidence linking Gregory to your mother's death. You're right, I said. I can't prove Gregory personally poisoned my mother, but I can prove his company contaminated this town. I can prove he paid people to cover it up. I can prove the system protected him instead of the people he harmed. But you can defend yourself, Vivian. You knew what Gregory did. You helped him silence witnesses. I clicked to financial records. Not just for reputation, you profited from it. Ashford Chemical made millions from those illegal contracts. You inherited that money. You've been living off it for 14 years. The EPA has the financial records. Gregory paid himself bonuses every time he successfully buried a contamination report. You signed the tax returns. You knew. For the first time, Vivian looked small, cornered. I was his wife, she whispered. What was I supposed to do? Tell the truth. 18 years ago, before my mother died, before I grew up without her. I clicked to the final slide. Photos of Rose at the farm, holding me, smiling. My mother came back to Cedar Falls because she loved this place. She wanted to raise me here. She wanted to give me the home she'd lost. Instead, she was poisoned, and I grew up in foster care. I spent 18 years wondering why no one wanted me, why I didn't have a family. My voice broke. I didn't try to hide it. The truth is, I did have a family. I had a mother who loved me, a grandfather who spent 16 years trying to give me a home. And I have all of you. A whole town that could have been my community if you'd chosen truth over money, if you'd chosen justice over comfort. I looked directly at Vivian. I'm not here to destroy Cedar Falls. I'm here to save it, to make sure what happened to my mother never happens to anyone else. The EPA is already investigating. The Attorney General is reviewing evidence. Ashford Chemical's assets are going to be seized and used to clean up the contamination Gregory left behind. You can't, Vivian started. I already have. The lawsuit was filed this morning. Not against you personally, Vivian. Against the company. Against the county officials who took bribes. Against the system that valued money over lives. I paused. But I'm giving you a choice. You can fight this. Spend the rest of your life in court, watching your husband's legacy be destroyed piece by piece. Or you can help me make this right. She stared at me, face white with fury and something else. Fear. What do you want? I want you to admit what Gregory did. I want you to help fund the cleanup. I want you to establish a scholarship in my mother's name for students studying environmental science. And I want you to stop trying to take my farm. The silence stretched. Then, slowly, Vivienne sat down. I'll think about it, she said. It wasn't an admission, but it wasn't a refusal either. I stepped away from the microphone. The meeting dissolved into chaos. People arguing, crying, demanding answers. Dorothy was surrounded by people, some angry, some supportive. Helen Price was speaking with a reporter from Omaha. I walked outside into the July heat, sat on the steps, waited for the shaking to stop. Nate found me there 10 minutes later. That was brave, he said. That was terrifying. Yeah, that too. He sat beside me. But you did it. You told the truth. Now what? Now we wait. Let the lawyers and investigators do their work. Let the town process what they heard. Give people time to decide who they want to be. I looked back at the community center. Through the windows, I could see people still talking, gesturing, working through 18 years of lies. Do you think it'll change anything? I asked. I think it already has. That night, Dorothy came to the farm with casserole and apologies. I should have spoken up years ago, she said. I should have been braver. You spoke up today. That's what matters. We ate on the porch as the sun set. Rufus begged for scraps. Nate stopped by with news. The Gazette was running a retraction of the article about me. 3 county commissioners had resigned. The EPA was opening a full investigation. Vivian's lawyer called Howard, Nate said. She's willing to negotiate. Really? Really? I think she knows she can't win. Not with the evidence you have. Not with people willing to testify. He smiled. You did it, Cara. You got your justice. But it didn't feel like justice. Not yet. Justice would be my mother alive. Justice would be growing up here, in this house, with Thomas teaching me to farm and Dorothy teaching me to bake and Cedar Falls as my home from the beginning. What I had instead was knowledge, truth, and the slow, painful work of healing. 3 weeks later, Vivian signed the settlement. Ashford Chemical's remaining assets, about $4 million, would fund the environmental cleanup. Another $1 million would establish the Rose Brennan Environmental Scholarship. And Vivian would withdraw her challenge to Thomas's will. In exchange, I agreed not to pursue criminal charges against her personally. She'd known. She'd helped Gregory cover it up. But she'd also been his wife, trapped in a system she'd helped create but couldn't escape alone. I didn't forgive her, but I let her go. Earl Patterson resigned from his position as county planning commissioner 2 days after the meeting. He submitted his written statement to the Attorney General, detailing the bribes he'd taken and the investigations he'd buried. It wouldn't erase what he'd done, but it was a start. The farm became home slowly. I learned to grow things from Nate and the other farmers who stopped being suspicious and started being helpful. I learned to can vegetables from Dorothy, who became the grandmother I'd never had. I learned to be part of a community from people who'd been willing to change their minds about me. A year after the town meeting, I stood in the field where Helen Price had photographed my mother. The soil had been remediated. The crops were organic, certified clean. And on the fence post, I'd hung a small plaque. Rose's field. She came home. So did I. Nate came up behind me, sliding his arms around my waist. We'd been together 6 months now, taking it slow, learning each other. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah." And I was, not healed completely. Still carrying grief, still angry sometimes at all the years I'd lost. But okay. Home. Belonging. Rufus barked from the porch. Dorothy was arriving with Sunday dinner. A few other neighbors would come too. People who'd become friends, who'd chosen truth after I'd asked them to. "Come on," Nate said. "You're not allowed to be late to your own dinner party." We walked back to the house together. The house Thomas had prepared. The house Rose had loved. The house that was finally, completely, irrevocably mine. Inside, I found the last letter Thomas had written. The one I discovered tucked in his journal, dated the day before he died. "Cara, if you're reading this, you fought the fight I couldn't win. You found the truth I spent years searching for. I hope it brings you peace. I hope it brings you home. More than anything, I hope you know you were loved. By Rose. By me. By this land that's waited so long for you to claim it. You are exactly where you belong. Welcome home, granddaughter. Welcome home." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the box with all the others. Then I went outside where people who'd become family were gathering, where Nate was grilling, where Dorothy was setting the table, where Rufus was begging for attention from anyone who'd give it, where home waited, imperfect and hard-won and real. I'd come to Cedar Falls looking for answers. I'd found something better. I'd found myself,